There's something deeply human about wanting to be remembered, to leave an imprint on another's mind. But what makes someone truly unforgettable isn't what most people think. It's not about perfecting your appearance or mastering manipulation techniques. The journey toward becoming unforgettable begins with understanding the psychological mirrors we hold up to each other. Carl Jung, the pioneering Swiss psychiatrist, would suggest that becoming unforgettable starts with a paradox. By truly knowing yourself, you create the conditions for authentic connection with others. This isn't about crafting a persona or playing psychological games. It's about something far more powerful, the courage to be seen as you truly are. Consider what happens when we meet someone who seems perfectly put together, who says all the right things, who never reveals vulnerability. They might impress us momentarily, but they rarely leave a lasting impression. Why? Because they haven't allowed us to see their humanity, their shadow, the parts that make them unique. You've likely experienced this yourself. Think about the people who have stayed in your memory. Weren't they the ones who showed you something real about themselves, who allowed you to witness their authentic joy, fear, passion, or curiosity? This authenticity creates what Jung called recognition, a moment when one soul recognizes another. Jung would argue that we're drawn to people who embody qualities that resonate with our own unconscious. This is projection, the psychological mechanism where we see parts of ourselves in others. When someone activates our projections in a positive way, they become fascinating to us, sometimes even mesmerizing. What if the key to becoming unforgettable isn't about changing yourself, but about revealing yourself, about bringing forth the qualities that make you uniquely you? This doesn't mean overwhelming others with every thought and feeling. Rather, it means developing self-awareness about your authentic nature, including your shadow aspects, those parts of yourself you might typically hide or deny. When you acknowledge these aspects of yourself, you develop what Jung called a container, large enough to hold the full spectrum of human experience. In America, we often focus on highlighting our strengths and achievements. Our culture celebrates individual success and positive self-presentation, but Jung's psychology suggests something different, that integration of all aspects of ourselves, including our weaknesses, quirks, and contradictions, creates a wholeness that others sense intuitively. Think about the conversations that have stayed with you. Weren't they often with people who dropped the social mask, even for a moment? Who shared something unexpected, something vulnerable, something true? A woman once told me about meeting her husband on a first date. I knew he was different, she said, when he told me about failing at his first business and what it taught him. He wasn't trying to impress me, he was sharing something real. 20 years later, she still remembers that moment of authentic connection. To become unforgettable in someone's mind requires a kind of courage many people aren't willing to cultivate. It means doing the inner work of knowing yourself, confronting your shadow, and allowing your authentic self to be seen, not as a strategy to manipulate others, but as a commitment to psychological integrity. Ask yourself, what parts of my authentic self do I typically hide from others? What would happen if I allowed more of my true nature to be expressed? What aspects of myself might create genuine connection if I had the courage to reveal them? When you begin this journey of self-knowledge and authenticity, something remarkable happens. You stop trying to be what you think others want. You stop the exhausting performance of perfection. Instead, you bring forth your unique constellation of qualities, your strengths and vulnerabilities, your wisdom and your wounds, your gifts and your growing edges. And in doing so, you become not just memorable, but unforgettable, not because you've manipulated someone's perception, but because you've created the conditions for genuine psychological recognition. What Jung called individuation is perhaps his most profound contribution to our understanding of human psychology. It's the process of becoming who you truly are, not who your parents wanted you to be, not who society says you should be, but the unique individual you are meant to become. This journey towards psychological wholeness is what makes a person not just attractive, but magnetically compelling to others. The paradox of becoming unforgettable lies here. The more you commit to your own individuation, the more you naturally stand out in a world of conformity. This isn't about being deliberately different or cultivating eccentricity for its own sake. It's about having the courage to follow your own inner compass, even when it leads you away from the crowd. In American culture, we often receive mixed messages about authenticity. We're told to be yourself, yet simultaneously bombarded with images of how we should look, act, think, and feel. The pressure to conform is immense, particularly in romantic contexts where fear of rejection can lead us to present only our most palatable aspects. Yet Jung's psychology suggests that what makes us truly unforgettable is precisely what makes us different, our unique combination of qualities, experiences, values, and perspectives. Consider the difference between someone who resonates with cultural ideals of attractiveness versus someone who has embraced their individuation. The former might initially catch attention, but often fails to maintain it, while the latter creates a lasting impression that deepens over time. This is because individuation creates psychological depth, and depth creates intrigue. One client described meeting her now husband at a work conference. Everyone else was networking, handing out business cards, saying all the right things, she recalled. He was quietly discussing philosophy with the bartender. When I joined them, he asked questions that made me think, not the usual small talk. I couldn't stop thinking about him afterward. What made him unforgettable wasn't a technique or strategy. It was his comfort with his own distinct perspective and interests. Jung believed that within each of us lies what he called the self, not the ego self of everyday awareness, but a deeper organizing principle that contains our full potential. The process of individuation involves bringing more of this potential into conscious awareness. As we do this work, we naturally become more authentic, more integrated, and, importantly, more fascinating to others. This isn't superficial work. It involves confronting what Jung called our shadow, those aspects of ourselves we've repressed or denied. It might include acknowledging anger we've been afraid to feel, creative impulses we've suppressed, or desires we've been ashamed to own. The shadow contains not only our darker impulses, but also our unlived potential, qualities and capabilities we haven't allowed ourselves to develop. When someone has done the work of shadow integration, they possess a psychological wholeness that others sense immediately. They're not fragmented by trying to hide aspects of themselves or performing to meet others' expectations. This internal coherence creates a powerful presence that leaves an impression. Think of the people throughout history who've captivated our collective imagination. They weren't necessarily the most conventionally attractive or socially polished. They were individuals who embodied their uniqueness without apology, who had done the inner work of becoming fully themselves. In relationships specifically, Jung observed that we're often unconsciously drawn to people who embody qualities we haven't yet integrated in ourselves. This explains the powerful attraction we sometimes feel towards certain individuals. They're activating aspects of our own unexpressed potential. When you've done your own integration work, you become a mirror for others, reflecting possibilities they may not yet recognize in themselves. This creates a magnetic quality that lingers in memory. A particularly American obstacle to this process is our culture's emphasis on immediate results and external validation. Individuation cannot be rushed or measured by others' responses. It's a lifelong journey that requires patience, reflection, and the willingness to sometimes stand apart from collective values. In a society that prizes social media approval and instant gratification, the slower, deeper work of psychological integration can seem challenging. Yet it's precisely this depth that creates an unforgettable impression. Consider your own experience. Who has stayed in your memory over the years? Is it those who tried hardest to impress you, or those who seemed most comfortable in their own skin? Those who reflected popular opinions, or those who thoughtfully expressed their unique perspective? Those who avoided conflict at all costs, or those who could disagree with integrity and respect? The journey toward individuation includes developing what Jung called psychological tensility, the ability to hold opposing forces within yourself without being torn apart by them. This might mean acknowledging both your strength and vulnerability, your rationality and intuition, your desire for connection and need for solitude. When you can embody these tensions, rather than seeking to resolve them prematurely, you develop a complexity that others find endlessly intriguing. Take a moment to reflect. What aspects of yourself have you been reluctant to acknowledge or express? What parts of your authentic nature have you kept hidden out of fear of judgment or rejection? How might bringing these aspects into conscious awareness contribute to your wholeness and, paradoxically, make you more unforgettable to others? This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about uncovering who you've always been beneath the adaptations and accommodations you've made to fit in. Jung would say that the most unforgettable quality isn't something you can manufacture. It's the natural radiance that emerges when you've committed to the work of becoming fully yourself. In the depths of the human psyche lie powerful patterns that Jung called archetypes, universal symbols and motifs that appear across cultures and throughout history. These primordial images represent fundamental human experiences and potentials, resonating in our collective unconscious like ancient melodies that each generation rediscovers. Understanding how these archetypes express themselves in your life can transform how you connect with others, particularly in romantic relationships. When Jung spoke of archetypes, he wasn't describing superficial personality types or social roles. He was pointing to something far more profound, the underlying psychological structures that shape our perceptions, behaviors, and relationships. These include archetypes like the hero, the caregiver, the explorer, the sage, the creator, the ruler, the jester, the lover, the magician, and many others. Each represents a different aspect of human potential, a different way of engaging with life's challenges and possibilities. What makes someone truly unforgettable is not trying to embody a particular archetype that they think will be attractive, but rather becoming conscious of which archetypes naturally express through them. This consciousness allows for integration rather than identification. You aren't trapped by an archetypal pattern, but can express its energy authentically while maintaining awareness of your whole self. In American dating culture, there's often pressure to present a carefully curated image, strong but sensitive, independent yet available, successful but not intimidating. This creates a kind of archetypal confusion where people try to simultaneously embody contradictory qualities without the depth that comes from true integration. The result feels inauthentic because it is. By contrast, someone who has done the inner work to recognize and integrate their primary archetypes possesses a psychological coherence that creates a powerful impression. Consider how archetypes might manifest in romantic dynamics. A man strongly influenced by the hero archetype might be naturally drawn to challenges, protection, and achievement. If unconscious of this pattern, he might compulsively take on rescuer roles in relationships or feel threatened when his partner doesn't need rescuing. But when consciously integrated, this same archetypal energy can express as healthy strength, courage, and the ability to face difficult truths, qualities that create deep trust and security in relationships. Similarly, someone influenced by the explorer archetype might value freedom, new experiences, and personal discovery. Unconscious, this might manifest as an inability to commit or constant dissatisfaction with what is. Consciously integrated, however, this same energy can bring adventure, growth, and fresh perspective to a relationship, qualities that keep connection vibrant and evolving over time. Jung believed that we each contain all archetypes within us, but certain ones may be more developed or accessible in our conscious personality. Others remain in our shadow, influencing us unconsciously until we bring them into awareness. This is why sometimes the qualities that most irritate us in others are actually disowned aspects of ourselves, projections of our own shadow material. Fascinating aspect of becoming unforgettable involves what Jung called the anima and animus, the contrasexual archetypes within each person. The anima represents the feminine aspects within a man's psyche, while the animus represents masculine aspects within a woman's psyche. While Jung's original concepts were binary, contemporary Jungian analysts have expanded these ideas to encompass greater gender diversity and fluidity. When a man has developed a conscious relationship with his anima, his inner feminine, he gains access to qualities like emotional sensitivity, relational intelligence, and aesthetic appreciation that might otherwise remain undeveloped. This integration creates a psychological depth and wholeness that others experience as magnetic. Rather than performing masculinity according to cultural scripts, he embodies a more complete humanity that includes both traditionally masculine and feminine qualities. One client described meeting her husband. What struck me immediately was how comfortable he seemed with all aspects of himself. He could be decisively masculine one moment and tenderly nurturing the next, without any sense that these qualities contradicted each other. He wasn't trying to impress me with some one-dimensional version of manhood. He was simply fully present as himself. That authenticity was incredibly attractive. This archetypal integration often manifests as a kind of psychological maturity that stands out in a culture where many adults remain emotionally adolescent. It's the difference between someone playing at being a man versus someone who has actually done the inner work to become one. not according to superficial cultural definitions, but in the deeper Jungian sense of psychological wholeness. Dreams play a crucial role in this process, serving as messages from the unconscious that reveal which archetypes are seeking expression in our lives. Jung considered dreams the most direct pathway to the unconscious, offering guidance about our psychological development that our conscious mind might otherwise miss. Paying attention to recurring dream themes, characters, and emotions can provide valuable insight into your archetypal patterns and how they might be influencing your relationships. One particularly powerful concept in Jungian psychology is the idea of the self-archetype, the organizing center of the entire personality that contains all other archetypes. The self represents our fullest potential for wholeness and integration. When someone has established a conscious relationship with their self, they possess a centered quality that others experience as profound presence. This isn't about ego inflation or self-importance, quite the opposite. It's about recognizing that your individual ego is in service to something larger than itself, your full human potential. This connection to the self creates what Jung called charisma, not in the superficial sense of social charm, but as a quality of psychological authenticity that naturally draws others. It manifests as a kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need constant external validation because it's sourced from within. People with this quality don't try to be unforgettable. They simply are because they've aligned with their own deepest truth. In practical terms, developing this archetypal awareness involves several practices. First is the cultivation of active imagination, Jung's method for dialoguing with unconscious aspects of the psyche. This might involve journaling from the perspective of different parts of yourself, creating art that expresses archetypal themes, or engaging in contemplative practices that allow unconscious material to emerge into awareness. Second is paying attention to your projections, the qualities you strongly react to in others, whether positively or negatively. These often point to disowned aspects of yourself. If you find yourself intensely drawn to someone's creativity, for example, this might indicate that your own creative archetype is seeking expression. If you're repeatedly irritated by someone's vulnerability, this might reveal where you've disowned your own need for emotional connection. Third is noticing patterns in your relationships. Do you repeatedly attract or are attracted to certain types of people? Do similar dynamics play out across different relationships? These patterns often reflect archetypal configurations, seeking recognition and integration. By becoming conscious of them, you gain the freedom to engage more authentically, rather than compulsively repeating unconscious scripts. A particularly American challenge in this work is our culture's emphasis on quick fixes and external solutions. Archetypal integration is inherently an inner journey that can't be rushed or accomplished through surface-level changes. It requires the patience to sit with uncomfortable emotions, the courage to face shadow material, and the commitment to ongoing psychological development. In a society that often prioritizes appearance over substance, this deeper work represents a countercultural choice, yet it's precisely this depth that creates an unforgettable impression. Consider how this might apply in your own life. Which archetypal energies do you express most naturally? Which might be lying dormant in your shadow, seeking integration? How might bringing these disowned aspects into consciousness create a more complete expression of who you are, and paradoxically, make you more magnetically yourself in relationships? The true power of archetypal awareness is that it frees you from the exhausting work of trying to be what you think others want. Instead, you become increasingly aligned with your authentic nature, expressing the unique constellation of archetypal energies that constitutes your individual path. This alignment creates a kind of psychological integrity that others sense immediately, a quality of being fully present and undivided against yourself. Jung believed that the ultimate goal of individual development was not perfection, but completeness, the integration of all aspects of the psyche into a coherent whole. This doesn't mean you never experience conflict or contradiction. Rather, you develop the capacity to hold those tensions consciously without being torn apart by them. This capacity creates a depth and complexity that others experience as endlessly fascinating. Remember that becoming unforgettable in someone's mind isn't about manipulative techniques or performance. It's about the courage to be authentically yourself, shadow and light together, It's about doing the inner work of archetypal integration so that your presence naturally creates an impression that lingers in memory, not because you're trying to be memorable, but because you've committed to the journey of becoming whole. This is perhaps Jung's most enduring message, that the most powerful form of attraction isn't based on presenting a carefully curated image, but on the willingness to engage in the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are. In a world of careful curation and surface-level connection, the depth that comes from this authentic self-knowledge isn't just attractive, it's unforgettable.